Welcome to the Physician's Guide to Financial Wellness, the podcast dedicated to helping physicians in Michigan turn their professional success into financial success while enjoying life along the way. And now, here are your hosts, Andrew Mushbaugh and Trent DeBruin.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Physician's Guide to Financial Wellness. This is Andrew Mushbaugh, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Trent DeBruin. And today we're going to talk about a topic that has become relatively less common today, yet still plays a big role for many physicians, which is a pension. Now, a pension is a general term that can refer to several specific types of retirement plans, but to avoid additional confusion around an already confusing topic, we'll stay consistent and higher level as we talk through the most relevant areas for you and what you need to know around pensions in general. And you may be aware from your own experience or anecdotally that the number of employers offering pension plans have steadily decreased, whether that's by quote-unquote freezing the existing plan in place or simply not electing to have one in the first place. But this is still a relevant planning topic for many physicians between looking at their frozen pension plan or a changing pension plan. So what we'll walk through today is a breakdown of, number one, the history of pensions, what they used to look like, how they've changed, and why they've changed. Number two, what a pension looks like today and understanding what your benefit will look like in the future. Number three, the different pension options you can choose in retirement. Number four, how to analyze the various options to figure out what's best for you. And number five, making a decision on how to utilize your pension and what that means in the context of your overall retirement paycheck. So Trent, why don't you start us off by breaking down this general term of a pension with a little history behind them and where we're at today?
Sure, and for anyone who's listened to other episodes of the podcast, you'll know we're big proponents of reframing the discussion and providing some context to help break down the various topics. So thinking about pensions, as with many other topics, it's helpful to first zoom out. The best way to do this is to look at how retirement in general in the U.S. has changed over time. If you think about the quote-unquote traditional retirement of someone born in the earlier part of the 1900s, it's easy to believe that it looked a little different than today. This was due to several circumstances, the nature of our economy, technology changes, and the culture at the time. But more often than not, if you look at the career path of someone retiring in 1960 or 1970, it was likely after a 30-plus year career working at a single company.
Well, how is that different from the more common 30-plus month job stints today?
I guess the main difference is about 27 years, but other than that, it's pretty similar.
All right, well, don't worry. I know we won't divert toward a conversation about how millennials don't have any loyalty.
Despite how on topic it is. But joking aside, that difference in how long people work for companies and how many companies they work for during their careers is the biggest change we've seen over the years, and you can cite any number of reasons for it. But moving back on topic of how this applies to a pension is that previous generations would often work at the same company for 30 or 40 years because that's when they would be eligible to start collecting on their pension or Social Security, which, as we talked about in episode number 35 on Social Security, often resulted in age 65 being the traditional retirement age. The idea was that you would work hard for a company for several decades, and in return, you'd be eligible for a monthly benefit as a set percent of your salary, which combined with Social Security would allow you to retire and live comfortably throughout your retirement. In other words, people weren't in a position where they had to think about funding retirement. It was their employer that would handle this. Well, that worked well up to a point until demographics began to change and people began to live longer, which meant there were more payments going out to retirees than initially projected. And this coincided with one of the worst periods for the stock market, which meant poor investment returns for the money that companies had in their pension funds, and thus created a problem where there wasn't enough money coming into pension plans relative to the amount of money going out. And we certainly don't make these comments lightly, given the reality of how many people's retirement has been negatively impacted by problems with pension plans, whether due to insolvency, poor investment returns, or some combination of issues, where companies were no longer able to make the required and promised pension payments to their retired employees. But eventually, as the flaws with the traditional pension system became more and more apparent, companies began to change the way they approached retirement planning for their employees, where the burden of saving for retirement started to shift from the employer or the company to the employee or the individual, which is where we stand today. Most people today are familiar with a 401k retirement plan, but probably aren't aware that these retirement plans weren't even created until around 1978. As I mentioned, this has been a gradual and continual shift where employers are phasing out or going away from offering pension plans due to various problems that are easier to spot now with the benefit of hindsight. As it applies to many physicians, the traditional pension of prior generations, where you receive a set percent of your salary, has also morphed over time.
Exactly. It's been gradual but consistent, and for some of you with pensions, you may have noticed that your pension is now frozen, where you no longer get credit for years of service or have a set benefit based on a particular formula. Or you may have noticed a change in the calculation of what your benefit will be in the future based on new formulas. And yes, sorry for anyone going through this firsthand and trying to wrap your head around your pension benefit. As a busy physician, despite a likely curiosity, it's very common where people either A, don't know if they have a pension benefit, or B, know they have a pension but don't understand what it is, or the benefit they'll receive. And looking at this objectively, it's one of those areas that has consistently been changing with different benefits, calculations, and projections being presented. So of course it would create confusion. But in an attempt to try and keep this as high level as possible to create a better understanding in general, you can think about the current form of pensions as future money you'll have access to in some form based on money contributed by your employer. So with a very generic definition out of the way, and trying to apply this to your situation, there are several common variables at play that determine the future money you'll receive. These common variables include number 1, your age, number 2, your salary, number 3, years worked at your employer, number 4, a set investment return or assumption, and number 5, when you elect to start receiving your pension benefits. So putting the generic definition together with the common variables, you can follow some simple logic. The older you are, the higher your salary, the more years you worked at your employer, and the later, at least up to a certain point, that you start collecting your pension, the higher your benefit will be. And when thinking about a pension, a logical question would be, well, where is this money or benefit that I'll get in the future? Again, this is where it varies depending on how your pension is structured. But in general, you can try to think about your pension like a shared investment account where you have a set percentage stake in it, which your employer contributes to each year. And then in retirement, you can take your piece of the pie or investment account. However, knowing in broad terms what a pension is doesn't help you understand what it means for you and how material of a benefit this will be. This is where you'll need to understand how your specific pension is structured, both in terms of your current benefit, but also looking at other factors like how long you work, your future salary, and when you elect to take your pension. To do this, and fortunately due to additional regulations and technology in general, you're able to model several different scenarios and variables out to project what your benefit will be in the future. For example, let's say I make $350,000 a year, work until I am 62, and elect to take my pension at age 65, what would my benefit be? By plugging in some assumptions, you can at least see what your future projected benefit is. For some people, you can stop there, and that may be good enough. But for others that want to understand how the different variables factor in, employers are required to have a plan document describing exactly how your benefit will accrue based on a formula.
So after understanding a broader view of what a pension is and what your future benefit is calculated to be, based on various assumptions, it might feel like a gotcha moment, where just as you thought you understood your pension and know what your future benefit will be, you then realize that there are several different options or choices about how to receive your future benefit. Once you see your projected future benefit, you'll notice how the benefit projections are presented in several different ways. You'll see different options like a lump sum option, a single life annuity, a joint and survivor annuity, a 10-year certain option, a 50% joint and survivor annuity, along with several others. On top of that, each option will have different monthly payment figures, and you'll then have to figure out how those monthly payments compare to the larger lump sum dollar amount that you could choose. So breaking this down, we'll start with the first option of taking a lump sum. And what this means is that you're choosing to receive your full lifetime pension benefit amount in the form of a single payment. AKA, I'm entitled to 1/8 of the overall pie, and I want it all today. When you elect this option, the initial reaction might be that you're worried you'll have to pay taxes on that full lump sum amount, whether it's $500,000, $800,000, etc., all in 1 year. Well, if that were the case, this wouldn't seem like a great deal to pay a huge tax bill just to receive that lump sum. Fortunately, you don't have to pay taxes on the lump sum when you take it, and you have the option of rolling it over or moving it into an IRA or individual retirement account. By doing this, you're able to avoid any taxation today, and in return, take full control over that money to then invest it as you choose and withdraw and pay taxes on it more on your terms. This option may feel like a blessing to have that control and flexibility, or it may be overwhelming to think about how that responsibility for handling the full amount of money suddenly shifts to you. If you're in the latter camp, you may be relieved to know that taking a lump sum is only one of your options. Looking at the other options, they all consist of a quote-unquote guaranteed monthly payment in the form of an annuity. For example, you may see $5,012 a month as the single life annuity, or $4,432 a month as the joint and survivor annuity. An annuity means that you receive that fixed monthly payment each month for as long as you live, or as long as you or your spouse lives, depending on which option you choose. While there are several different options, at the broadest level, these monthly payouts allow for flexibility depending on your life situation. Looking at the single life annuity, this will be the highest monthly dollar amount, but the trade-off is that the benefit is only for your lifetime, hence the single life. If you're single, this wouldn't be as big of a deal, and you'd prefer to have the higher monthly payout for as long as you live. However, if you're married, this could be a big risk, where in theory you could start receiving a $5,000 a month benefit on day one, then on day two something happens to you where that payment ends and your spouse is left with nothing. This is where the joint and survivor options come into play. You have various options based on your preference and unique situation, but in general, the way it works is that even if you pass away, your surviving spouse still receives some portion of the monthly benefit you were receiving, maybe 50%, 75%, or 100%, for as long as they live. When looking at these various options, keep in mind there are no games being played by your employer in terms of one option being objectively better than another. The payments are all calculated mechanically based on actuarial life expectancy tables. So those scenarios just discussed are the most common ones when it comes to choosing how you want to receive your pension. However, there are also certain payouts like the 10-year certain period that splits the difference. In other words, if you're worried about your spouse not receiving anything if you happen to pass away early, this option provides a payment that's guaranteed for a certain period of time, say 10 years, regardless of whether or not you live for that long. And if you do happen to live beyond that point, you continue to receive a monthly payment.
All right, sorry for those who thought it would get easier after understanding what your pension benefit will be in the future. Only realize that you get an additional 10 plus choices to choose from.
Yeah, hopefully we haven't lost too many listeners so far.
I don't think we could blame them. But for those of you who are still listening, now it's time to put everything together and understand what option is best for you. As usual, we look at this decision of what's quote-unquote best from two different lenses. One, the purely financial side, and two, what helps you sleep best at night. Starting with the purely financial side of the equation, it's a relatively straightforward calculation once you know what to compare. The goal is to compare what rate of return you would have to earn on your lump sum payment in order to be better off than the guaranteed monthly payment options. Stepping back and looking at an extreme point to exaggerate this logic, let's say you took a $1 million lump sum payment and earned 100% return the next year. Well, now you have $2 million. And compare that to the annuity option of getting $3,000 a month for the rest of your life, no more, no less. But looking at this extreme example, you will likely be able to see that you could take out a lot more than $3,000 a month and still grow your lump sum account balance, which means you'll ultimately receive a higher financial benefit from your pension by taking the lump sum. Of course, the flip side could be true, where you'd invest the $1 million and lose 50% in a year, and now you'd be in a position where you'd have to take out less than $3,000 a month or risk running out of money. Somewhere in between those two extremes is where you want to look at when comparing your options and figuring out what makes the most sense financially. This is where you want to look at the hurdle rate, or rate of return you need to earn on your lump sum in order to be better off relative to that monthly pension amount you'll receive. And taking an exaggerated example, let's say you received a $1 million lump sum on day one and are comparing it to the single life annuity of $3,000 per month. Well, if you passed away on day 365 of retirement, you'd receive 12 monthly payments of $3,000 or $36,000 in total. So you want to compare what rate of return on that $1 million lump sum amount would result in you being better off. Well, you'd have to lose more than 95% of your lump sum to be worse off than the single life annuity, at least in this example. Obviously, that's another extreme example, but the goal is to project out to various ages and look at your various pension options to figure out what this hurdle rate is. Often you'll find it's typically somewhere between 2 and 4% as the rate of return you need to earn on the lump sum to be better off by investing that money yourself relative to taking the annuity or monthly payment option. And this varies by plan and the current interest rate environment, but purely from a financial perspective, similar to looking at comparing paying off debt versus investing, it's looking at what stacks the odds in your favor longer term. Knowing the stock market has historically earned around 10% annually and bonds around 4 to 5%, in most cases you can reasonably expect to do better by taking the lump sum rather than taking the annuity payments. There's certainly no guarantee of that, and each plan will be different, but that's a general framework to follow when looking at the purely financial side of the equation. However, some people are intimidated by managing a large amount of money or just feel better with the certainty of a monthly payment and knowing they don't have to worry about what's going on in the stock or bond market on a yearly basis. In some sense, this is similar to Social Security or your paycheck during the working years, where sometimes it just feels better having a stable amount of money coming in each month. On the flip side, and because of some of the problems of pension plans in the past, there may also be a certain amount of stress of having such a large benefit tied up with someone else and some uneasiness about what happens if something goes wrong with my employer or the underlying investments of the pension plan. In this case, some people feel better knowing that they are fully in control of the money as opposed to relying on someone else to create that monthly annuity payout for them. And as always, we encourage people to weigh both the financial side of the equation along with what helps them sleep best at night to ultimately come up with the best plan for you.
Yeah, we probably should have started out with the disclaimer that this isn't always a straightforward or easy decision.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, I guess it's a little too late for that now.
Yeah, we'll remember it for next time. So that's an overview of pensions in general and a framework for how to figure out what's the best option for you. But we want to end by adding a quick bit about looking at your pension plan within the context of your overall retirement plan and retirement paycheck. As I mentioned earlier, the traditional retirement has changed over the years, and we've moved from a situation where pensions were the major source of retirement income for people to one where they're now a relatively smaller source for most people. We expect this trend to continue going forward, which is in line with the general shift in the burden of who's responsible for saving for retirement, from a situation where companies handled much of it to one where it's now mainly on the individual or the family. A pension plan is just one potential piece of your retirement plan, and when thinking about the decision of taking a lump sum versus an annuity, you don't want to make that decision in a vacuum without looking at everything else. So when considering this decision, it's helpful to go back and figure out what your retirement paycheck will look like under all options you're comparing. We won't go into the details here since we discussed creating a retirement paycheck in more detail on episode 12, but the first step is getting organized. You can do this by looking at your income sources, Social Security, as well as your pension, if choosing the annuity, along with your investment accounts and savings, which include 401ks, 403bs, 457s, IRAs, taxable accounts, etc. After doing this, you may have a burden lifted by finding out that either option you choose between the lump sum versus the annuity won't impact your ability to fund your retirement paycheck and meet your goals. And if that's the case, it just comes down to a personal preference and what feels best for you. On the other hand, you may realize that in order to meet your ideal lifestyle in retirement, you need more money than what would be provided through the combination of your pension annuity payment and a safe withdrawal rate from your investment accounts. If that's the case, you may need to let your money work more for you with the potential of earning a higher return. And in that sense, the lump sum would give you the best odds and might make the most sense for your situation. Again, there's no across-the-board right or wrong decision here since it varies so much depending on your specific situation. But it's important to understand that virtually no single decision you make with your finances is ever a purely isolated one.
Yeah, that's a great point, and why we can't emphasize it enough, the importance of being organized, understanding all your options, looking at trade-offs, and then making an intentional decision on what's best for you and your family. I know we went through a lot here, but hopefully that helped to break down your pension into something a little bit easier to digest. So to give a quick recap of what we went through today, number one, when thinking about your pension as it exists today, it's helpful to understand the history of retirement and how it has changed over time. There's been a shift from the responsibility being on the company offering a guaranteed monthly payment toward a higher responsibility on the individual to save up and make smart financial decisions. Number two, it's helpful to understand what a pension is, and at a very basic level, you can think about the current form of pensions as future money you'll have access to in some form based on money contributed by your employer. On top of that, while there are different types of pensions, your benefit is most commonly determined by several factors based on your age, years of service, salary, and age you elect your benefits. Number three, after understanding what your pension is from a higher level, you'll want to be aware of your options. You can project out looking at some of the variables I just mentioned to see how it impacts your future benefit, but you'll typically have some combination of elections based on either number one, taking a lump sum, or number two, receiving a monthly annuity. And with the lump sum, it's important to remember that this doesn't mean you are taxed on the full lump sum, and you have the option of rolling it into an IRA. Number four, after you know what your future expected benefit options will be, the next step is comparing the various options to find out what's best for you. This is where you'll want to weigh both the purely financial decision with what helps you sleep best at night. With the financial side, the goal is to look at the hurdle rate or rate of return you need to earn on that lump sum to be better off than taking the monthly annuity. And lastly, number five, your pension and the decision of how you elect to receive this benefit is just one piece of a bigger puzzle. So make sure you understand how this plays into your overall retirement plan to help make the most informed decision on what works best for you. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for another episode of the show. If you want to check out the show notes, you can find them at mdwmllc.com/podcast. And as always, you're also welcome to email us at info@mdwmllc.com if you have any thoughts to share or questions you'd like to have answered. Take care, everyone, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Want even more ideas, tools, and resources on how to make smart financial decisions? Check out the resources section of MD Wealth Management's website at mdwmllc.com, where you'll find additional knowledge and insight from Michigan physicians, including a blog, ebook, and one-page guides. While there, you can also schedule a 15-minute conversation with Andrew and Trent to learn more about what it means to work with the firm and how they serve physicians. If you've enjoyed the content, please leave a review on iTunes and share with your friends and colleagues. Thanks so much for listening. Andrew Mushbaugh and Trent DeBruin are certified financial planners, principals, and co-founders of MD Wealth Management, a registered investment advisory firm in the state of Michigan. All opinions shared in the show are for general information and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future returns. Please consult with your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before making any decisions.